Yeah, there's no sound coming from Orion, and I will let him start. He's gonna be hosting this.
All right. Is that working any better?
Yes.
All right, great. Just switched to mobile. Test, test.
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, cool. All right. Sorry about that. All right. So, yeah, if you are in the audience and have a proposal that you would like to speak to, please request to come up as a speaker. And then I'm going to do a bit of housekeeping and then we will get things rolling. All righty. Um, all right. Let's get things kicked off. I'm sure that more folks will roll in. Yeah, so it's an unfortunate situation. Just personal note, it's been a rough few weeks for everybody. So thanks to the whole community for coming around the table to work on the recovery process here. The kind of common goal here is to establish a equitable THORFi unwind plan over the next 90 days. Success here means that THORChain can continue to grow via integrations, new chains, and the vibrant app layer ecosystem, while it's able to service its obligations to THORFi users. I just want to lay the stage for what to expect here. We have a 90-day pause that's being enforced by nodes. Over the next 30 days, submissions will be collected from the community and stakeholders, and then we'll have about a 45-day period for discussion and refinement around those, followed by 15 days for node votes, and then the implementation of the proposal can commence. For folks that are looking for THORFi liabilities data, I've posted some spreadsheets with summaries for lending and savers in the THORFi Unwind proposal channel. And so you can find that information there. Just to make sure everybody's on the same page, the goal of this stage is to give proposal authors an opportunity to discuss their proposals, have some Q&A with the community questions, and have a discussion that can be very focused around the Unwind plan only. Authors are kind of asked to give an overview of their proposals, how it addresses savers and lending liability, and the rest of the protocol. So at this point, just open invitation for proposal authors to step up, and we can get things kicked off. All right. Delta Code, can you hear me? All right, should be good to go.
Hey there.
Hey, Delta, how's it going?
Hey, not an author of proposal. I read all of them, so I don't know if you want me to just hold off until the end. I was just going to suggest like proper communication to keep the community calm, which is important to an orderly unwind. So if we're just going to talk about that and how to communicate, I can save that for the end or a different time.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate that. Let's save it for now, and we'll just roll into the various proposals at this point, and then we can hit that at the end. Just to keep, so let's save it for now, and we'll come back.
Okay. Hey, I don't want to actually talk about my proposal just quite yet, but I want to throw out a perspective that I have not seen at all, that I kind of just thought of myself. And, you guys check me on this, but I was just thinking that, if we consider the lending liability to be completely liability, the saver's liability is only half liability because there are half L1 assets. So THORFi as a whole, you could just say is 25% solvent on if you just put a box around it. So I just hadn't kind of seen that perspective. I wanted to throw that out there before we dig into the proposals. And then I'll talk about my proposal later on if that's cool.
Yeah, thanks. So just in terms of the liabilities here, the claim on synth BTC, exceeds the LP pools. So even though the synth units have kind of claims on Rune and asset, in order to make those synth holders whole, that could effectively it would negatively impact the pools. So I'm kind of the opinion that the savers needs to be unwound proportionally to the synth claim, not 25% necessarily. But all right, let's keep moving here. So Bull, do you want to jump into your proposal now, kind of highlight all of the pieces that you think are important? Then we can have a kind of discussion for 10 or 15 minutes, and then we can move on to boons.
All right. Perfect. I'll set the stage. So I've written 5 different proposals so far. This is the 5th version. And every single time I was reading somebody's proposal or I was looking at mine, I was asking myself, what are the odds that this can be achieved? And the answer was very little. So to set the stage, essentially, like, I went back to the root cause of why I didn't think it could be attainable. And it's because as a business, THORChain is new and growing, but it's not historically been sustainable. To attain 50 million, the first $50 million in revenues, there's probably been over $1 billion of capital destroyed through different hacks, the different reflective features or features that were moving property rights in between different counterparties, like impermanent loss protection, different stuff like that. So we need to make THORChain sustainable if we are to repay $200 million in liability. So that's the first step of everything, is simply the current state of things need to be optimized if we're going to do this. This is what I realized. This is why it took me so long to write my proposal, because I've had to review the entire economic design of THORChain. So right now, like, if we're looking at THORChain as a business unit, which we never do in crypto, because crypto protocols are generally just Ponzi's, right? They're just taking new participants' money and basically burning more money than they use to function. But if you're looking at THORChain, it can actually be a solid business, and it can scale. THORChain is as the first mover advantage. It's a very complex thing to scale, and the total addressable market is very, very large. So the idea is, like, I think for any of those proposals, the prerequisite is for THORChain to scale, because there's not going to be $200 million of liquidity tomorrow. That's not that's just simply not there. So let's get more into the specifics about the plan itself. The plan itself. So I was looking at everything, and so to scale, there needs to be a couple different things. There needs to be, ideally, investors' liquidity coming in. The higher the room price, the more ARB volume, the more fees getting paid. Like, it's all a reinforcing cycle. There needs to be more user interface swap volume, and there needs to be more capital efficiency. If I look at THORChain right now, it spends probably like 60% of the money on liquidity itself, which is like liquidity pools. We don't know if that's sustainable or not, just because THORFi is so complex that it's impossible to understand if it covers the impermanent loss or it doesn't. The other expense is 5% for the team, which is at room price right now, maybe not even sustainable, but it's close to it. There's a 5% burn right now, which normally burn is on, like, basically profit share buyback, that needs to go for now. And there's probably 30% spent on security budget, validation, everything else. So for people to understand validation, the business of THORChain is probably like 30 full-time people, operators, that work around the clock 24/7. And if THORChain would be on AWS right now, it would be about $500,000 a month in expenses. And it's also $300 million of capital, more or less, inside of the bonds to protect the network and keep the economic security of it. So this needs to be paid somewhat. We might be overpaying there also slightly. So we need to optimize all of this to become a cash flow positive entity and be able to distribute money to the creditors. So that's the premise of it. I don't know if I explained it well, but essentially we need to optimize the business side of things, and we need to scale it. That's the premise of it. So if any proposal is trying to essentially, like, take more money than is sustainable, it's just not going to be lasting. It's going to be impossible to fulfill those obligations. So for the plan I wrote, the first thing, and it's a very hard one to deal with, is what are the liabilities themselves. I've pulled up on-chain data and modelized it. We've tried to claw back all profit expectations. We've done it a bunch of different ways, and every time I had the thing denominated in crypto, I could not foresee like a high likelihood of that happening. Just because if the debt outgrows the revenue, it's going to be impossible to raise capital from institutions. It's going to be impossible. Like, institutional capital is the key here. if we can go around and make this thing clean, and we can go pitch it to institutions and we can get them on board, this thing will scale. But they're not going to do it if there's doubt and uncertainty. Like, it needs to be a clean setup, and this is the opportunity for it. So my plan is to dollarize the debts, the liabilities. I've posted in my proposal a snapshot within 5 minutes of the freeze, and essentially there's about $200 million of debt, more or less, on both sides. So that dollarization will be tokenized, and the token will be emitted to be claimed from the wallet on the THORChain network. So that token will be worth $1 of debt, and THORChain will take a percentage of revenue. What I'm suggesting is 10% to be sustainable, and we'll buy back that token at very regular intervals. So it's going to be an order book system, and people will be able to sell it at the price that they want. In the case of FTX liquidation, if I'm not mistaken, about 75% of creditors have sold their claims before, so they decided to take liquidity before. So what an order book like that enable is for a secondary market to be able to farm around it, and people who have longer time preference and like they can invest money and just be at the end of those claims. And people who need money now to exit, it's going to provide them extra liquidity than the protocol can't. Those claims need to have a profit incentive to it. Otherwise, it's going to take too long to solve. So those claims, THORChain is committing to bid them up until $2. So for each $1 of debt, it's going to act like a bond on future revenues that can be worth up to $2, depending on how long it takes to generate it. That's going to be trading on the market according to the length of the perceived risk and the opportunity cost of capital. So essentially what that does is, if THORChain, let's just say we go on a large roadshow and we convince a lot of institutions to come in, and the value of the token triples or quadruples, and we manage to integrate a lot of front-end interface, we manage to promote it to users, and it makes 5 times the revenues. Well, we could see the forward-looking value of the bond reach at least full face value of the debt today. So if that's in a year, in 2 years, some investors will come in and they're going to be like, okay, well, I want to make the spread between that $1 and $2. I'm going to bid on this, and I expect it to take 3 years for my money to get back. So I'm going to try to make a profit. It allows essentially new liquidity to come in and buy this debt and have a profit expectation, and everybody's happy, and it's a way more liquid market for the debt. So yeah, for this to work, everything needs to be aligned. So the total protocol overview of the economic design to be certain that it's sustainable, and managing that new participants can expect a profit, because if they don't, if we limit it, they're not gonna invest, right? As far as the economic design itself, the concept of passive liquidity and liquidity pools has kind of failed. If you look at Uniswap, the studies show that only a handful of pools are actually making LPs money if they're unsubsidized. So we need to move towards more active liquidity. Active liquidity, THORChain doesn't have to pay for, and it fills in the gap because they don't have to suffer the impermanent losses. So the ARBs are active liquidity. They're doing a good job right now, but getting them to a faster block rate, they're going to be able to do a better job and add more liquidity. And the other thing we have to do is to upgrade the pools to version 3, which is concentrated liquidity, which is professional market maker coming to put money right at the edge of the asset value, so that there's not a ton of liquidity wasted. What that does is to allow for greater margins for THORChain. Right now, it's overpaying for liquidity. So essentially, like, it's to make THORChain profitable, scale THORChain, and give a percentage of revenues uh, to the creditors, as well as create a healthy secondary market on like where people can put liquidity and buy future debt repayments.
Hey, Bull, that's awesome. Thanks for the summary there. Just wanted to bring a couple questions up. So is in your proposal, are savers and lending handled in the same way?
Yeah, exactly in the same way. Basically, like, you look at how the assets are structured on THORChain, and it's all in a common pool, right? So everybody thinks they have a claim on this. Like, I've talked to every party, and the reality of it is there's 5 to 7% of the total market cap of the bad debt and the ruined asset that would actually be available if people were to exit. So we absolutely need to restructure everything. This proposal basically winds down THORFi altogether, removes all of it. Liquidity is locked in the pool. If there's lawfare involved, the liquidity is still going to be there in the exact same form. Like, the current form of the liquidity and the way it was always stored was always decentralized liquidity pool units. This is how it always was. And everything else is kind of like Fugazi accounting. And it just didn't work, obviously, because the reality is it's always been decentralized liquidity pool units, and it's always like the entire thing has always been exposed to that risk.
Yeah.
So basically, we went down all of THORFi, and there's 200 million, a little bit over 200 million TUSD tokens that are claimable by the creditors.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just to kind of steelman the can you guys still hear me? Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, sorry. So just to steelman the like dollarization decision in your proposal, what can you talk a little bit around, like, why having the liability fixed in kind, so in unit BTC or ETH,
Yep.
wouldn't work, and in the event that Bitcoin price dumps drastically or vice versa, like why the dollarization is, why you think that might still be an advantage or not?
So we don't know what those assets will do in the future, but the trend has been very volatile, right? I think the key to this is essentially a mature version of THORChain pitching to institutional liquidity. They're ready to come in the space. It's the first project where you can pitch it like a real business and you can really explain where the money goes and how much the money comes in. So they're gonna understand it. But if you tell them that you have a debt that's gonna outgrow the possible revenue and there's a cliff, they're not gonna touch it. And I think like that's a real key here, is to go after these guys to be participants, because like THORChain itself is a wonder. It's incredible. THORFi was always a very bad idea. I think it's taken back THORChain a lot. So yeah, I think if we have the uncertainty, and let's say, because this is going to be a multi-year repayout, like, don't get me wrong, there's no magic solution here.
Right.
Like there's no magic solution. Everybody needs to be aligned towards the success. And if we cannot align some groups and some group are parasitic to others, the entire thing is not going to work, because it's just simply too big. Like, I don't think THORChain has made even $50 million in total revenues from swap fees so far. And just to give people, like, just to be real with people. So essentially, like, any solid investors that's going to come in with a lot of money and support the ecosystem is going to want to have some kind of stability and knowing the future. If the future is unknown and everything always changes like it's done on THORChain, it's impossible. Like, so far, it's one of the best DeFi protocol, and there's very, very little smart money involved into it. simply because the rules were always changing. The developers were always pushing to take on new risks. Like there's nothing like certainty to investors, to large investors. They're already rich. They don't want to risk. They don't want to risk losing their money. So if we do this in a very orderly way, that's going to be possible. I think denominating it in Bitcoin, if Bitcoin goes up 5x, then that the whole plan feels impossible, right? And generally speaking, I was looking at bankruptcies. Like it's a very special situation with THORChain since like the equity holders normally get destroyed in a bankruptcy, but the equity in case of THORChain, what you could be calling the equity, is actually the product itself. So if you don't have a good room price, you don't have swaps, you don't have economic security, you don't have all of that, and there's zero chance. Basically, the liquidity, like the short sellers would take it before, so there's zero chance anybody gets made whole. So it's kind of a weird situation that's completely not aligned with the traditional system.
Yeah.
So
thanks for the perspective there. I just want to make sure that other proposal authors have an opportunity to discuss their proposals. Boone, you're up next. You want to take it away?
Sure. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, so, man. All right, so first of all, I do not have the capital market experience of Bull, so I'm just going to defer in most things to him. My personal, I'm also a relatively small stakeholder in THORChain, so like I recognize my voice doesn't carry a whole lot of weight, but just like from a just pure principles situation, I would like to see the debt denominated in kind. What that does is potentially you just always have that 10% system income split in there, and THORChain system participants will always make less. Like if you dollarize it, then eventually it will be closed, and then at some point THORChain will, participants will be making that much more. But if you denominate in kind and you just stack, you pay out in kind, then eventually or maybe never. So, but maybe it does. Like the stablecoin pools would definitely get paid out, and then some of the other, especially during bear markets, I think some of the other L1 assets would get paid out. That's just my 2 cents. I recognize that most people want to dollarize the debt, so that'll probably happen. But I think we should do it in kind just to honor our word. As for my proposal is specifically for savers, just because it's a different animal than lending. Lending's pretty straightforward. There's just a certain amount of debt. But lending also has capital in the pools, savers has capital in the pools, which impacts our DLPs. And Bull didn't really talk about his specific proposal for savers, so maybe he could go first, and then I could kind of show how I think about it differently. I don't know if he wants to take it back.
sure.
Yeah, Bull, you want to hit that?
Yeah. Basically the specific proposal is to simply, so those assets, like everybody can claim they have a right on it, right? Like the savers don't have the underlying assets and they're on a reflective design. So if you start exiting, there will be less and less percentage of like it's bankrupted. So like anybody who feels like they have the right to a Bitcoin in there, that's good. But sadly, the Bitcoin is not there, and it's not going to be there if we do any kind of transactions in there. It's all going to be gone. And yeah, essentially, if you look at the mechanism of the lending, they also have a right to the assets in the DLP. Like everybody has a right on this. So I guess it would be better if these assets are just frozen in there, and eventually if there's a bankruptcy court that hears this, because this is not really precedented, normally like those protocols, they go to zero. This one got saved, then they can order a distribution of those assets. But this is what the assets always were. They were purely liquidity pool units, and so they're just going to stay in there. They're going to be locked. The protocol locks its liquidity. The protocol locks the POL and the treasury's liquidity is basically locked in those pools and it stays in there. So yeah, that's the idea. Everybody feels like they have property rights, even the liquidity providers who knew of the rule the entire time, right? I'm not blaming them, but they were losing and bleeding money for years now. They know exactly what their balance is right now because that's the only thing that's accountable. And somehow I've had a lot of people claiming that those people should be entitled to those assets and it should be distributed to them. So I think it's a very bad idea. There's no surprise there for the LPs. There's no change. There's no change in their balance. Essentially on the dashboard, like they were already aware of where they were. I'm sure they were hoping THORChain recovers, but sadly this is not the case. It's defaulted for all of those assets. So I don't know if I explained it well, but essentially leave them in the pool, log them in. Validators can always vote to log them out later when things evolve.
Boone, did you want to respond there?
Yeah, Bull and I have been going back and forth in DMs, and I want to throw out a few things he had mentioned to make sure that's still part of his plan. First of all, and I think everyone who knows anything about savers has agreed on that this is a necessary step, but synth leverage needs to be removed from the pools. Bull's proposal would do that by converting synth units into LP units. And so as he just mentioned, that keeps everybody's current position the same. It does wipe out synth leverage to, do you want to interrupt?
Yeah, I'll just add some context. Like they talk about synth leverage, but the pools are actually not leverage. What was happening with synths is the impermanent loss from the savers were getting passed on to the liquidity providers, and that was a known thing. And the liquidity providers, they would have profited the other way on the upside, and they would have been reflective on the outside. But there's no leverage. There was reflectivity in the design, but there's no leverage to be closed there. Like this is not leverage. This is a reflective design, but there's zero leverage in the pools. I'll let you go, but I just want to make this clear. Like it's not like there's leverage to be closed and assets to be sold. Like they suffered the loss because they were assuming the impermanent losses of the savers, and vice versa. If the rune had overperformed, the liquidity providers would have greatly profited. So I'll just want to leave that there because there's a misconception about synth leverage. There's no leverage. It's just the impermanent loss that were passed on to the other counterparty.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to push back there a little bit. Like, I mean, just so if you just look at the math, if you convert the synth units that exist now into pool units and get rid of the synth math, then that will change how any current position acts into the future based on price. So, I mean, I don't know how you want to call that, but like how the position is impacted by token prices will change. And so I call that synth leverage, like that, the difference in math, however you want to call that, there is a difference. And so his proposal would be removing that difference. It has downside and upside. If Rune underperforms the asset, then it exacerbates DLP losses. If Rune outperforms the paired asset, then the DLP gains versus the synth position. But I just want to be clear that the way the position behaves will act differently, however you want to call that. So I call it synth leverage. And anyway, so that's, would you agree with that?
I would call that like a change in the protocol economic design, and there's been many of those through the years, right? When synths were there, lenders wasn't there. Like when liquidity pools got started, there was no sense. So like this has been like a normal course for the protocol to adapt. It's part of the original rules that it can be changed, but there's no debt or leverage. It's just simply like.
Yeah, we're agreed. I'm just saying, yes, the economics of the protocol will be changed by your proposal. I just want to like make sure everyone understands that piece.
Yeah, we're agreed.
The liquidity providers are losing the upside of reflectivity from savers. That's it.
Okay. Yeah, and And then I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
Hey, Bruce, do you want to just take a moment? We can hear from Steve.
Sure. Yeah. Let me recollect my thoughts.
Yeah, sure. Hey, Steve, how's it going, man?
Hey, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, sure can.
Okay, great. So I authored the discount auction module proposal, and I just wanted to say to everyone that if you liked anything in my proposal, personally, I would advocate that you put your support behind TCV's proposal. For reference, the discount auction module was based on the concept that lending position holders could essentially bid with increasingly high discounts in order to exit immediately. This has the benefit of providing an immediate exit option for those who want it, while also reducing overall liabilities faster with every discount that was accepted. TCB's proposal also accomplishes this and is actually much easier to implement and also apply to savers since as well. You know, I wanted to do it with non-fungible tokens. I think the TUSD idea is much better. Just on the topic of dollarization, you know, I've come around on this. I think it is an unfortunate necessity. Being short Bitcoin and ETH was very much what got us into this mess in the first place. Continuing to peg our liabilities to what are like effectively some of the strongest assets in the world is just doing the same thing, but packaging it in a different way. You're just saying if BTC continues to outperform Rune, then our debt is going to last longer. And that 10% like guaranteed inefficiency baked into the protocol, which generates no value, it's just revenue that gets sucked out. You know, maybe today we don't have to worry about like a chain flip or a Maya being able to take over us because of that. But if this duration of our debt lasts like 10, 20 years, I mean, you know, which it might if Bitcoin and ETH keep increasing against Rune, how long can we sit on that 10% inefficiency without at some point some competitor coming along and outpricing us on swap quotes? You know, in my opinion, we need to put the mistakes of the past behind us, not double down on them. I think we need to just make a firm commitment that minting tokens to paper over problems is not a good solution. Being short volatile tokens is not a good solution. And THORChain should just focus on the effective delivery of a simple product with good market fit and straightforward revenue distribution and value capture. That's really all I had to say.
I have something to add to this. So essentially, like when I try to envision the bull scenario of each proposal, here's the bull scenario for mine. Let's say everything goes right. The stars are aligned, everybody's aligned. We don't get stuck in lawsuits. The bull proposal is we raise a bunch of money, we scale the thing, we raise the valuation, let's say by 5x, which is not a stretch. We've been twice as high before. We raise the volume on the front end interface by 4 by promoting it ourselves, by more wallet integration, by more chain integration. Well, those USD tokens, they probably trade like around $1 on the aftermarket adjusted, because that's what I'm describing here is about a $35 million distribution a year. So they probably trade at $1 discounting for the value of capital and the risk. So this is possible to get there, God willing, because there's a lot of variables, but it's possible to get there with the best execution in 2-3 years. Where realistically, like I was looking at the other proposals, and I think they were some of them that put out timelines, I think they were overly optimistic. And like you had a lot of variance to the results by tokenizing volatile assets. The variability is also killing the potential investors. So that's my point. Anyways, but there's a bull case where this gets resolved fairly quickly, like it doesn't hang over our heads for 10 years.
Thanks. Grok Enjoyer, would love to hear from you.
Hey, GM, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure can.
All right, good stuff. Sorry, I showed up a bit late, so I've only managed to skim over TCV so far. But the main things that I'd just like to confirm and just get some clarity on is what happens when you convert all the synthetic assets to liquidity pool units. So my understanding is that the synth units are subtracted from the LP units value, and if you just delete them, convert them to LP units, that essentially rescues the DLPs, and then the synths would essentially be deleted while their underlying LP would remain in the pools. Is that correct?
No. Like that's one way to do it, but it would essentially be redistributing the assets from whoever has a claim on it, because as I said, there's many people that can claim those assets to the DLPs, and the idea is not to redistribute those assets. The DLPs have taken those losses because they were in there with a very specific reflective design, and that was a known variable. It's really sucks. Like I have great understanding for the frustration, but they're not owed other people's asset. So these assets, they stay in a pool because there's a good chance this ends up tied up in litigation, and those assets, like the current thing that is backing the entire all of those different features is always, if you break it to the core, it's always like liquidity pool units. So these things, they need to stay in there.
Okay. Let me try again. So I think either I'm miscommunicating it, or I'm suggesting something impossible. But I am not suggesting that the liquidity that the synth units are, like, when the synths are made, they put in DLP positions. I'm not suggesting that those are redistributed to the DLPs. I'm merely suggesting that what happens when the synth units are deleted and those like the rune/asset remains in the liquidity pools. Like, for example, Boone has suggested that maybe the POL would take those over, turn them into working assets to help repay, but not to redistribute them to the DLPs.
Yeah, that's the idea. So essentially, like the DLPs, what they see on their dashboard right now, their current liquidity position, they're gonna be keeping the same at the moment where this is gonna be done, and the rest is just gonna be converted. So the entire pool is only gonna be DLPs, but they're gonna own the same share of the pool essentially that they currently do.
Okay, I'm probably misunderstanding, because I'm under the impression that if that the LP units of the DLPs are worse off because of the synth units, but if you convert, because the synth units have the value of the underlying asset, but if you just convert these synth units to the current value of the actual LP, then there's less being subtracted from the DLPs. But maybe I'm just wrong about it.
Well, the idea is not to subtract anything from the DLPs. It's just to convert the rest of it into LP units.
And Grok, I think you might be getting at what Boone was talking about a little bit earlier, where the like synth, what we've been calling kind of synth leverage, meaning like the reflexivity that synths put on DLPs, would be eliminated, but the DLP position is kind of at that current ratio, basically, if that kind of makes sense. So like there's no more reflexivity because everything's been converted to LP units. In that case.
Maybe I'm just wrong about the mechanics. So my understanding is that the calculation that determines how much a DLP has is whatever their LP units are minus whatever the synths would have a claim on, which is currently more valuable than the assets backing it, right? So if those claims are just wiped and turned into a normal DLP, then there's less being subtracted.
Grok, can I get in here? I was trying to help you with this in DMs. You don't have it straight, and so this is not going to be a productive conversation because you don't understand the math, and like that's just how it is.
All right, I don't have it straight then. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for hopping into chat. Kenton, how's it going?
Good, thanks. Do you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I was actually just thinking, maybe before we start debating solutions, we should probably just identify the problem. Make sure we all agree on that first. And the problem is rune sell pressure, the rune price, right? We need to get the rune price up. That's how we solve this. And for lenders and savers, like what got us into this mess was prioritizing them, and that's what crushed the rune price. And so to get out of it, we need to deprioritize them. So I've read lots of comments, people saying, we need to get lenders paid off as quickly as possible, blah, blah, blah. And no, I mean, the longer we take to pay you back, the better for the rune price. It's that simple. So like Bull is right about, like, we need smart money. We need any money coming into THORChain, and the only way to do that is simplify it and to fix our liabilities, and make it predictable. And so I think whatever plan gets approved is going to look, lenders and savers are not going to like it on the surface. But this is a case where going slow actually gets us there faster. Whatever looks worse for lenders and savers here in the beginning could actually end up getting them paid back much sooner, because what looks worse for lenders and savers is going to look much better for anyone investing in Rune going forward. That gets the price up sooner, that gets the pools bigger, that gets more volume, and yada yada, right? Gets things going. So I just wanted to highlight that for anyone listening.
Yeah, thanks for that perspective. I'm going to bring a couple more people up to chat here. Let's see. Mr. Smith, Crypto Sailor, how's it going, man? Let's keep it focused on the THORFi Unwind, please.
I definitely wanted to focus on that. I appreciate that. There was two things. One primary thing that I wanted to bring up that's been mentioned in the chat, which is that those who were providing their collateral to the protocol for lending were actually getting leverage, and they got that leverage up front. So they took 50% or some near value close to that for the collateral they put up. And that's been taken arguably out of the protocol and paid for primarily, as we've seen, the losers, biggest losers are dual liquidity. So I'm wondering if there's a way of considering the fact that they've already profited at the front end of their arrangement with THORChain, essentially, and that therefore there shouldn't be a way to consider the collateral owed as less than what it actually is, if there's some way to ensure there's a sharing of the haircut.
So yeah, I've thought about this, right? Like we've done a lot of modelization and scenarios, like over the 5 different proposals I've written. And one of them was basically to remove all of their profit expectation from savers, which is the entire yield was only $3 million the entire time. Because we took all the blockchain data and we analyzed, okay, when people deposited their loan, the price of Bitcoin was that much. They took out that much. That's the difference in Bitcoin of that day. So we owe that much Bitcoin, right? So we remove all the profit expectations. And I started pitching that to people around me, and they were vehemently against it. It would get the liabilities down, but at the core of it, like with all the turning around that I've done, essentially, like we've got a rocket ship here that can be one of the biggest we're successful, and the details, they don't really matter. The only thing that matters is how can we grow these things and how can everybody be aligned. So if everybody feels completely rugged right away, that's not going to work, right? Like community sentiment is part of this. It's kind of a weird thing with crypto where it's a bunch of strangers that align towards a similar goal, and individually we all do our part. It's like a hive mind, but there's no clear leader or coordination. Normally when there's a clear leader, things go wrong. Crypto is very resilient, it's very strong, but yeah, I don't know where I was going with this. Sorry, I'm very tired.
I understand the point. My point.
I didn't think it was a good idea to let me finish. Sorry, I cut you off. But I didn't think it was a good idea to include that because I don't think it's going to change anything to the outcome. Like what I'm looking for, like I was always looking, the guiding light on this was I was looking at the outcome and I was trying to figure out how do we get here. And I don't think it matters at all. It's kind of like I look at how Madoff structured their bankruptcy because it was kind of the same thing, like shoveling of assets in between people with no real profit to share. And I applied that modelization, and yeah, it it doesn't make this more likely to happen, right? It doesn't improve the odds of people getting paid back. At the end of the day, like, it is what it is, and the only way we can do that is by growing the revenues, by growing the value of the protocol, because the revenues are tied. So for those that don't understand, the revenues are tied up to the value of the protocol, because the higher the rune price, the more money in the pool, the more arbitrage volume, the more fees. So probably 80% of fees, if I'm not mistaken, are arbitrage volume. This is very important to understand. So essentially, we need to align people, otherwise it's just not going to work, and we cannot pre-rug them before we get this.
Well, my point was that there is a group of people who are losing. If you were to say that the dual LP positions were reflexive to both the upper side and the downside of the rune price, if now the dual LPs have experienced the reflexivity to the down price and you're going to disable that reflexivity, they've lost the reflexivity to the upside. Not only that, but as I mentioned, those who are providing collateral lending actually got leverage on that, and they received their leverage up front. So the idea is that to reduce the amount of liabilities, and it shouldn't just be $3 million, because somewhere between, I don't know, 30, I would assume, I didn't check the math, but 33, let's say a third of the collateral that people were putting up, they got that out up front. So they got paid out in the beginning, and now everybody else is paying at the end. So the idea would be to say, to make sure that those who have been, let's say, most experienced the worst of this, which is dual LPs, we're not expected to take any further losses, and that would include the best chance for success of the protocol be reducing the liabilities as much as possible, which could be justified. That's just my point. I understand that people could disagree with it, and I support your efforts generally otherwise in terms of growing the protocol and scaling. So thank you very much for your work.
Thanks, Taylor. Appreciate that perspective. So another thing that this just made me think about, and I think I've had discussed this with some folks in the past, but we could also look through loans that leverage looped, and that the idea being that the amount that they put into the system, might be like half of the total collateral that is kind of on the books right now, and we could kind of unwind some of that as well to help reduce the liabilities at this point. All right, I got another person that wanted to speak here. Slam Baller. Hey, Slam Baller, how's it going?
All right. Yeah, thanks. I think it's. I don't think I'll take too long, because I think I'm just following on with what Crypto Sailor said. Essentially, I know that there's very little to go around, and I understand that the dual liquidity providers are losing the reflexivity to the upside. I would kind of question the principle of when a dual liquidity position is down in both rune and asset, whether that there shouldn't be a debt considered there, and we're considering paying out savers and borrowers. To me, it feels strange to consider no debt there, but a debt to the savers and the borrowers. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
From my point of view, like, the difference I see there is, like, these positions, they were open for years, and it was very public how the design was made. So it was like willful market participant in something that was like officially part of the design, where I don't think the risks of lending and the risks of savers were really that clear. Like, if you had the DLP position and you saw both sides go down, and it's been happening for like since savers launched or a long time ago, well, if you're still in there today, it's because you were expecting it to go on the other way, and you were accepting the risk, right? And it's a huge difference between that and not knowing the risk of the design that you're onboarding into. And I'm not gonna say that, like, a 0% loan against your crypto sounds very sound to take. Like I would never take that as a user, just because it doesn't sound plausible. But yeah, the DLPs, they had their position on their dashboard. They could see those statistics go down over time.
Look, yeah. So I guess I get your premise. I fundamentally disagree. If the principle is that the risks for borrowing and savers weren't clear, then I think it's difficult to say that how those affected dual LPs was clear. Yeah. So I guess I just disagree, and yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Can
Let's do
I pick back up?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so this exact kind of disagreement or whatever the thing we're talking about right now is exactly what informed my proposal. Bull and I went back on this and back and forth on this on DMs. So I'm gonna explain my proposal by way of contrasting it with his. His proposal kind of gives savers a weird double claim on assets. So they get the full value, the USD value of their position in TUSD. So they get the debt claim, but then also he wants to keep the tokens in the pools and give them also a pseudo claim to that. They're locked out of it.
Like there's just a legal reality here, and if we start distributing those assets, well, the legal reality is.
I mean, here I'm not trying to misrepresent.
There's no office like this. This doesn't exist. Like there's no other claim. Like people, they're on the code level of the protocol. We offer TUSD. That's it. But after that, there's the real world as well. Like some people have promoted and participated in something that was very destructive to other people, and yeah, the things will unfold how they will unfold.
Right. I'm just trying to make this understandable to everyone listening. And so what he proposes is that essentially the protocol seizes the saver's liquidity in the pools and keeps it as protocol owned liquidity, and it just stays in there and does its thing, provides liquidity for swaps, which is great for growing THORChain. And then if the lawyers ever come knocking, then, well, here's their assets, and that's what it is. And is that an accurate restatement of what you're saying?
Yeah, but I don't think it's just gonna be their asset, right? I think it's like all parties will be involved in this. Like the way bankruptcy court is normally all parties are considered. There's nobody that has claim on these assets. Like not one claim. Everybody has like if you break down the mechanisms of everything, like everybody has claims on those assets. If you break it down to the first principle, to the core, like all of those assets, everywhere they were DLP, and it was all interacting with DLPs. So either way, like I don't think taking savers' assets and giving them to DLPs is like makes any sense there.
Right. Okay. And so yeah, he kind of said what was originally in my proposal. Well, so in contrast, to be technical, his proposal would convert synth units into LP units in the pools, whereas my proposal would remove synth units. And so that would, in effect, that retroactively converts savers' synth positions into DLP positions. And so that essentially erases the effects of what we've been calling synth leverage. And as Bull points out, that does transfer assets. So like if we were to do that, the dashboard value of a DLP position would increase. And so we would be transferring positions from savers to DLPs. And he's like, that might not be legal. We can't do that. And I'm not disputing that at all. Okay. I'm not pushing back on that. That was my original proposal. I wasn't aware of the legal ramifications. That is what it is. Listening to this call, I came up with a happy medium. We can reimpose a second accounting fiction that might never come into play. But if instead of converting the synth units into, like, we can convert the synth units into LP units, but also in a separate ledger, keep track of them. So like just a separate ledger. And then if a lawsuit never materializes, then we could retroactively give those synth units back to, or back to the DLPs. And so the DLPs wouldn't get that capital right up front, but if the fear of a lawsuit never materializes, then they can maybe get some, because otherwise it's just the protocol. The protocol is seizing the capital from the savers. We're giving the savers a debt token in exchange for their capital in the pools. And so I think that's already illegal.
I think the part that's getting lost in translation here, between what TCB is saying and what you're saying here, is just the fact that there are multiple parties that have claims to the same asset. And so rather than distributing it to one over the other, the protocol is going to hold it so that there isn't a one party that gets those assets. And I think, does that?
Well, what I'm
help?
saying is, if we just change the accounting, it would not be giving any assets to DLPs. So it would stay in the protocol. The protocol is not favoring anyone, but there is an accounting trick down the road. And now this is an if. I fully recognize it's an if, but Kenton is very correct that if rune price runs, and I know there's no guarantee it runs against Bitcoin, but if it does, that solves so many problems. And so, I guess I'm trying to hold out in a way that the DLPs don't suffer what I've been calling, and I wrote a paper on it, what I've been calling synth loss, the removal of it locks in but Bull is fair. They were in the position, they're down, that is their position. They don't really have a claim on that reflexivity to the upside. I totally understand both sides. I'm just trying to thread the needle in the middle. And if we could somehow create an accounting where it's held by the protocol, it's not given to the DLPs, but it is kind of noted as this capital might be able at one day to be handed back to the DLPs, is just the idea I just came up with on this call.
Yeah, and then one thing to take into consideration is alignment, and it's going to be impossible to raise capital if you start doing stuff like that. It's going to be impossible to pitch it as a clean runway. We need to remove
Can I jump in about? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Kenton.
Sorry, Bo, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Go for it.
Let me go. All right. Okay, sorry. Sorry, I thought you were done, Bull. I just want to talk about the DLP having a debt kind of idea and what we owe them. So what they're getting out of this is they still have unlimited upside, right? We're capping the upside on savers and lenders here. So by leaving DLPs alone, they can grow out of this and continue on participating in the upside. And as far as the reflexivity of synths and we experience the reflexivity and leverage on the way down, we want to get that on the way up. That may never happen, right? When synth savers came out, I wonder if any LPs are in the black, and it's the existence of those synths that make LPing toxic and it makes nobody want to do it. So the yields on the pools trade higher, right? It's like high yield debt, like junk debt, right? The higher the interest rate, the more toxic the instrument, and the synths just make the pools toxic that nobody wants to touch them. So they have to the pools trade at consistently higher yields. If we get rid of the toxicity and make pools simple and easy to understand and predictable, they'll trade at smaller yields, which means the pools get much bigger, which means the rune price goes up and DLPs get up sooner. So again, it's one of those scenarios where going slower, you might get there faster. So by removing the leverage of the reflexivity now, that might seem bad and I'm not going to get back up as quick as I could have. Well, no, actually making it simple and straightforward could actually get you back up much sooner and get you into the black much sooner. I just want to say that.
I agree. Essentially, The only way this works is by simplifying things. And one of the things that I outlined in my proposal, like I think more than once, is the need to be making liquidity providing sustainable from here. We cannot make right what happened in the past. That money is gone. That's what like people don't all understand is like that liquidity is mostly gone. But okay, and Morgaki, you asked how we can make the LP design improve, right? So basically, I explained it earlier. Passive liquidity, full range LPs are not much in use anymore. Everybody is using concentrated liquidity models, where active market makers are providing liquidity just in time based on asset price. So they don't have a full range, and they're not getting hit by all of these asset price fluctuation. If I had to guess, there's probably 20 market makers doing this, and probably 5 are profitable, but they're quite large. So they can add just-in-time liquidity, and this liquidity is there to profit also from the way that they're priced. So we need to pay it like liquidity is the biggest expense, but it's very expensive to pay for liquidity on a full range pool. It's much less on a concentrated liquidity pool. And the other way, Morgaki, to answer your question, is to allow LP units to be bonded. So right now, one of the capital inefficiencies of THORChain is there's $3 of room for $1 of exogenous capital, and all of that money needs to get paid for each swap. It's very capital inefficient. So if we allow those LP units to be bonded, Maya tried that. The security model, I think it needs to be market driven, not arbitrary. What we're trying to achieve, we need to let the market decide how much security is going to the and how much is going into the LPs. And locking in LP models that basically juices the yield for the LPs. And the third thing is making ARBs, like people think of ARBs as predatory, but actually they're just people adding liquidity that are not getting paid. So they're making money on those trades. ARBs are very, very good for the ecosystem. They add tons of liquidity for those swaps. Right now, the only way streaming swaps work is because ARBs work and they have liquidity on both sides and they're willing to buy those assets, and they connect it with the rest of the market. Like the ARBs, in fact, like they work with every other exchange, and they move assets back and forth to the blockchain itself. So we need to help our arbitrageurs make a better job by lowering the block times, which is already in the works, and maybe ask them if there's other tools they need to do a better job. Because the better the ARBs does the job, the better the experience of the swappers.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Bull. So we've been on for about an hour here. I just want to kind of wrap things up. We have a 30-day period here to discuss proposal ideas, so we can do more of these stages if the community wants. Across all of the various proposals, system income is a really big component around how this all can be unwound gracefully. So yeah, I just want to kind of reiterate that we need to be able to grow our way out of this. And I think that integrations, new chains, and the app layer are kind of critical pieces here. And just make sure that as we're working towards a solution that there isn't something that can slow any of those things down. I had a quick question. Okay, it was asking from Kotsu, can you recap what you said at the start of the call? What's Nine Realms' plan, time-wise, for those who missed it? Yeah, so just to reiterate that, we have a 90-day pause that's enforced by the nodes here. We're going to have 30 days for proposal submissions. Then we'll have 45 days of discussion and refinement from there, and then 15 days to vote. This is a complicated situation, and it's going to take time to arrive at the right solution that balances, all of the various stakeholders here. So I don't want people to think that this is going to be a rush to a solution here. We just need to take some time and arrive at what will actually work, can have THORChain continue to grow, and we can move through and do the implementation of all of this. Yeah, just for the rest of the folks here, encourage you to dig into the proposals in that are in the Discord channel. As questions come up, let's keep the conversation positive there. And yeah, thanks to the whole community. Really appreciate the professionalism that people are bringing to this. I know it's very stressful, but yeah, we got this. So one step at a time.
If the conversation is still going, I guess I'd just like to point out, ignoring the legalities of holding on to the remaining liquidity that the synths deposited, holding on to that, it has the potential to gain yield, and because it's not leveraged, we don't get as destroyed when things go down. And it allows it to grow and potentially be used for quicker repayments.
Yeah, that's certainly something to consider as well. So yeah, I think if folks are good, we can wrap it up here. I'll dig through the stage thread and try to answer things as I can. Awesome. Thanks all. Really appreciate it.